You just met with Macron yesterday, Tech for Good. Is this really now the limelight on the technology industry in France? Is it a good place to grow your business?
Yeah, it's nice to see a world leader who's optimistic about, one, the general direction of the world, and two, about technology in particular. The French ecosystem has a lot of the raw materials and raw ingredients that should lead to a booming startup scene, and we're starting to see that now on the Stripe side. So it's really nice to see the engagement from President Macron and his team.
Talk to us about your growth regionally, particularly in Europe. You're based out in San Francisco, you're from Ireland originally, but you are a truly global company.
That's right. I grew up in Ireland, ended up moving out to the United States, but now Europe is a very fast-growing market for us. The UK, obviously, and now starting to see much more in continental Europe, France, Germany, and places like that.
UK, obviously, you say, interestingly.
Well, the UK is such a large economy and such a highly digital economy. But in particular, one of the things we're seeing is the platform economy growing really quickly. And so actually half of the French startups funded over the past 3 years are platform companies of some degree. This would be the large companies you'd be familiar with are the Ubers and Airbnbs. But there's a huge long tail of companies going through every sector of the economy and bringing them into the online world. Things like, Mano Mano, a French customer of ours in the DIY space, doubling year over year. But there's plenty of others. Clark's in Germany in the construction space. They really are going all over.
And of course, you make revenues by the fact that you're helping them build their payment infrastructure, but you're doing much more than that. What else are you helping the companies do? You help them found themselves to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's right. We think in a way payments is the easy part often at times. If you look at the amount of administravia and burden that a business has to deal with just to operate a business online, it's traditionally been far too complex, and we think that's dissuaded many technology companies from growing or growing internationally. And so we look at helping them, run a subscription business, prevent fraud, manage their incorporation, run the marketplace infrastructure, all the tasks that go into running an internet business that are beyond payments but are still kind of non-core for these businesses that they would like to outsource.
What about big companies that you're working with? You struck a big deal with Amazon. Can we get any more specifics on what it is that you do for Amazon? How much sort of money is coming through your platform on the basis of that?
Yeah, so the general thing we're seeing with large companies that I find really exciting is they are realizing, and especially large companies, say, in more traditional industries, that they have to move at the speed of startups if they're going to stay relevant. So, if you're in the hotel space, you're trying to figure out what your Airbnb strategy is. If you're in the retail space, you're trying to figure out what your Amazon strategy is. They realize that, consumers are picking the things that, consumers prefer that offer a better service. They need to actually be able to invent new business models and keep up to stay relevant. And so we're working with Accor Hotels here in France, one of the largest hotel chains in the world. They're building a travel marketplace. We're working with The Guardian in the UK. We're working with a lot of very established businesses that are realizing they need to reinvent themselves to stay relevant in the online age.
So how big is the opportunity for Stripe now? Because you're not just a startup fueler, you're for big corporates too. How big could you become? What do you see your revenues becoming?
We see the opportunity as the entirety of digital spend. I think a lot of people tend to denominate it in terms of, how big is e-commerce or, other e-commerce players or things like that. But when you look at the raw numbers, we've talked before about how 5% of the economy is online today. We think that's going to grow by an order of magnitude. And if you look at what a lot of Stripe customers are doing, they're not competing with other internet companies. They're, again, bringing, look at the ride-sharing sector, look at a lot of the e-commerce sector, look at, people like Mano Mano, who I just talked about, competing with traditional DIY brick-and-mortar retailers. It's often people who are competing with some kind of offline solution, but offering a much better digitally enabled product.
It's a competitive space. There's plenty of people in payments, some form or another. There's the PayPals out there. There's also, we've seen the local grow faster as well. Adyen, particularly in Europe, is growing up. Where do you see yourself fit within the ecosystem? Are you getting competition also coming from the likes of Apple and Google?
Well, Apple and Google are partners. We work them to enable Apple Pay and Android Pay. We were a launch partner for Apple Pay. And honestly, we're really excited about some of the new entrants who are coming into the space. Because if you think about it, again, the friction of buying or kind of doing any kind of commercial interaction online has traditionally been one of the things that's, that's been holding things back. So you look at the media space, you compare how easy it is to buy a newspaper in person with all the hassle that goes through filling out the paperwork online. Things like Apple Pay, things like Google Pay can make that way simpler, and as a result, people can build much bigger businesses.
Where does your business go from here? Of course, we have, as I mentioned, Adyen's just said today it's going to be selling shares, IPOing. We just had iZettle bought out by PayPal. you resolutely remaining independent?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, we have so much left to do. I wouldn't want to give that up or, put that in jeopardy. We have so much left to do, again, in terms of abstracting the complexity that goes into running an online business. We just launched the latest version of Radar, our anti-fraud product. Last year it prevented $4 billion in attempted fraud on behalf of our businesses. And again, there's so much more we can do in that space of abstracting this complexity. And on the international side, the US and Europe are quite big markets for us. But you look at Southeast Asia, you look at Africa and places like that, there is a ton to do and we're just getting started.
I've got to ask it though. When will you go public? Is it any time soon? Are you even talking to banks about it, talking internally about it?
It's not going to be anytime soon.